On her way to the most important exam of her life, a black female student froze when she saw an SUV burning fiercely. Inside, two children were screaming in despair, while a crowd of people just stood there filming. Without hesitation, she chose to miss her exam and used her bare hands to smash the car window to save the children even as her skin was burning. The reward for her heroic act was a cold expulsion letter from the academy. She had no idea that the two children she saved were the governor's own grandchildren, and when the sound of helicopter blades tore through the sky above her slum, that was the moment the scales tipped. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe so you can receive the blessings from this video. The photograph was cold under Zoe's fingertips, but she held on to it anyway. Every morning, same ritual. She would trace the outline of her father's face, the curve of his smile, the way his firefighter helmet sat just slightly crooked because he always put it on in a hurry. "I still remember your voice, Daddy." Her throat tightened. "Some days I wake up and I swear I can hear you calling me for breakfast. Then I open my eyes and it hits me all over again. You're gone. You've been gone for 10 years, and it still feels like someone's ripping my chest open every single time." She pressed the photograph against her heart for a moment, eyes closed. He was the one who taught her to braid her hair. Every morning before school, his big, rough hands working through her curls with surprising gentleness. He would talk to her about his crew, about the calls they ran, about why he loved the job, even though it scared her mother half to death. "It's not about being brave, baby girl," he told her once. "It's about knowing someone needs you. When you hear that call, when you know there's a person out there who might die if you don't show up, nothing else matters. Not fear, not comfort, not even your own life." The last time she saw him, she was 12 years old, eating cereal at the kitchen table. He came in wearing his uniform, smelling like coffee and the cheap soap from the station. He knelt down beside her chair, looked her right in the eyes. "Zoe, baby, I need you to remember something. You're going to see people in this world who need help, strangers, people who might not even thank you after, but don't you ever walk past them. You hear me? Promise me." "I promise, Daddy." He kissed her forehead and walked out the door. That night, her mother came into her room, face swollen from crying, and told her that Daddy wasn't coming home. There was a fire, children trapped on the 4th floor. He got them out, all 3 of them, then went back for their grandmother. The ceiling collapsed before he could reach the stairs. They gave him a medal. They gave speeches about heroism and sacrifice. And 12-year-old Zoe sat in the front row of his funeral wearing a black dress that itched, thinking that she would trade every medal in the world just to hear him call her name one more time. She set the photograph back on the shelf and looked at herself in the mirror. 22 years old now. Final year at Georgia Fire Academy. Top of her class. "One more exam, Daddy, just one more, and I'll be where you were. I'll be wearing the same uniform, walking into the same fires." She almost smiled. "Maybe that's crazy. Maybe I should run as far away from flames as I can after what happened to you. But I can't. This is the only way I know how to keep you alive." She finished braiding her hair, grabbed her bag, and headed out the door. The walk to campus took about 45 minutes if she kept a good pace. No money for the bus today, same as most days. She passed the stop where other students waited, tried not to feel the sting of it. Some of them had cars. Some of them had parents who paid their tuition without blinking. Some of them had never worked a double shift at a diner just to afford textbooks. But none of them were ranked first in the class. That belonged to her. She had earned it with everything she had. The morning was quiet, the streets still waking up. One more exam. One internship spot at Atlanta Fire Department. After today, everything would change. Then she heard the scream. Zoe stopped walking. Her whole body went rigid. Up ahead, maybe 50 yards, an SUV lay flipped on its side in the intersection. Smoke poured from the crumpled hood. Flames were already spreading along the undercarriage. A crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. 30 people, maybe more. Phones raised, recording. Just standing there. Through the shattered rear window, Zoe could see 2 children strapped in car seats. A little girl, 5 or 6, fighting against her restraints, screaming. A smaller boy beside her slumped forward, blood on his face, completely still. Her feet moved forward on instinct. Then she stopped herself. No, wait, think. She looked around at the crowd. 30 people. Someone must have called 911 by now. Fire trucks were probably already on the way. Professionals with equipment, with training, with gear designed for exactly this situation. She wasn't even certified yet. She didn't have any equipment. What was she supposed to do, run into a burning car with her bare hands? The little girl screamed again. "Help, somebody help us, please!" Zoe's chest tightened. She took another step forward, then stopped again. The exam. The exam started at 8. She checked her phone. 7:42. If she left right now, if she walked fast, she could still make it with a few minutes to spare. Someone else would help those kids. The fire department was probably 2 minutes away. They didn't need her. But nobody in the crowd was moving. They just stood there watching filming. "Come on," Zoe whispered under her breath. "Someone do something. Anyone. Please." A man in a suit glanced at the burning car, then looked back at his phone. A woman with a stroller took a step backward, pulling her child closer. An old man shook his head slowly and muttered something about how somebody should really call somebody. The flames climbed higher. Zoe felt sick. She could see the little girl's face, now twisted with terror, tears streaming down her cheeks. The boy still wasn't moving, and that woman in the front seat, hanging limp against her seatbelt, had no idea her children were about to burn to death 3 feet behind her. "Walk away, just walk away. You can't save everyone. You're not even a real paramedic yet. If you stop here, you lose everything." She thought about her mother. 60 hours a week on her feet, coming home with her ankles swollen, collapsing onto the couch without even eating dinner some nights. All those double shifts, all those years of sacrifice just so Zoe could have this chance. If she lost her scholarship today, what would she tell her? "Sorry, Mom. I know you worked yourself half to death for me, but I threw it all away for strangers." The fire reached the back tires. Black smoke billowed into the air. "Walk away. The fire department is coming. It's not your responsibility." The little girl locked eyes with her through the shattered window. Just for a second, a 5-year-old child looking at Zoe like she was the only person in the world who could save her. "Please," the girl sobbed. "Please help my brother. He won't wake up." And Zoe heard her father's voice, not from memory this time, but from somewhere deeper, somewhere in her bones. "Don't ever walk past someone who needs your help." He didn't walk past. 10 years ago, he ran into a burning building without hesitation. He saved 3 children. He went back for their grandmother, even though the structure was failing, even though his crew was screaming at him to stop. He died because he couldn't walk past. And now Zoe stood here watching his legacy burn in front of her, trying to calculate whether her scholarship was worth more than 2 children's lives. What kind of person did that make her? She thought about the exam again, about Ashford and his policies, about Kyle Ashford waiting to take her spot the moment she failed, about everything she had worked for. Then she looked at that little girl's face one more time. There was no choice. There never had been. Zoe dropped her bag on the sidewalk and ran. She grabbed a metal water bottle from a woman frozen at the edge of the crowd, smashed it against the rear window until the glass shattered, pulled herself up onto the side of the overturned vehicle, and the heat slammed into her like a physical wall. Inside smoke filled her lungs immediately. Her eyes burned. She could barely see. "I'm here, sweetheart." She reached for the little girl. "Cover your face. Keep your eyes closed. I'm going to get you out." The car's seat buckle was jammed from the crash. Zoe's fingers worked at it frantically, the plastic hot enough to blister her skin. She could feel the flames getting closer behind her, could hear them crackling hungry. "Come on, come on, come on." It released. She pulled the girl free and passed her through the window to someone outside. "Get her away from here, as far as you can." She turned for the boy. The fire had reached the back seat. Her forearms were burning, the pain sharp and immediate, but she couldn't stop. She cut through his straps with her pocket knife, pulled him against her chest, and threw herself backward through the window. Flames swallowed the spot where he'd been sitting half a second later. The driver, someone yelled, "She's still in front." The woman was waking up, confused blood running down her face. The kids, they're out. They're safe. We have to move. Now. Zoe smashed the driver's window, helped drag the woman free, and they stumbled away from the wreck together. They made it about 60 feet before the gas tank exploded. The blast knocked them both flat. Zoe lay on her back chest, heaving arms, screaming. She stared up at the sky and thought, "I just gave up everything. My scholarship, my career, my mother's sacrifices. All of it. Gone." A firefighter's face appeared above her. "You got all 3 of them out." She nodded. Another 2 minutes, and they would have been dead. He looked at her with something like wonder. "You saved their lives." 2 minutes. Then reality crashed back in. "What time is it?" 8:52. The exam had started almost an hour ago. It was already over. "I have to go." "Ma'am, those burns need treatment." "I have to go." She made it to Georgia Fire Academy just after 9:30, running through the doors with bandaged arms and smoke still in her lungs. The examination hall was empty. Director Kevin Ashford sat behind his desk like a man who had never been inconvenienced in his life. Silver hair, cold eyes. "Miss Williams, you missed the examination. Sir, there was an accident. Children trapped in a burning car. I pulled them out." She held up her arms. "I can get documentation. I just need to retake the exam. Policy requires examinations to be completed at the scheduled time. Absences must be authorized in advance. I didn't know there was going to be an accident. Your score will be recorded as 0. 0. The word hit her like a punch to the stomach. "That means I lose my scholarship. I'm aware. Sir, my mother works 60 hours a week to help me. If I lose my funding, rules exist for a reason, Miss Williams. I cannot make exceptions." Zoe stared at him. She had just pulled 3 people out of a burning car. Her arms were covered in blisters. She could still taste smoke in the back of her throat. And this man sat there telling her that policy mattered more than any of it. "If I had let those children die," she said slowly, "I would still have my scholarship. Is that what you're telling me?" Ashford's expression didn't flicker. "You acted on impulse. Now you live with what that costs." He went back to his paperwork. Zoe walked out, made it to the stairwell before her legs buckled. She sat on the cold steps crying into her bandaged hands. When she got home, a letter was waiting. "Due to your failure to complete the required final examination, your scholarship has been revoked. You are required to pay $42,000 within 48 hours or face permanent expulsion." $42,000, 48 hours. She looked up at her father's photograph. "I kept my promise, Daddy. I didn't walk past." The tears came again, hot and bitter. So why does it hurt so much? Zoe woke up the next morning with her arms throbbing and her eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the weight of everything came crashing back. The letter was still crumpled on the floor where she had dropped it. $42,000, 48 hours. She sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in her bandaged forearms. The burns had kept her awake most of the night, but it wasn't the physical pain that hurt the most. It was the feeling of having done everything right and still losing. But lying here feeling sorry for herself wasn't going to change anything. She spent the morning gathering evidence. She called the fire department and requested an official incident report. She took photographs of her injuries. She reached out to the bystander who had filmed her rescue, and he sent her the original video without hesitation. By noon, she had everything organized in a folder. Documentation, proof, evidence that she wasn't making excuses. Ashford would have to listen this time. He would have to. The walk to the academy felt longer than usual. Every step made her arms throb. Every block reminded her of what she stood to lose. When she finally reached the administration building, the secretary barely looked up from her computer. "Director Ashford is in meetings all afternoon." "I'll wait." She sat in the hard plastic chair outside his office for almost 2 hours. Students walked past, some offering sympathetic glances, others avoiding eye contact entirely. Word had spread. Everyone knew what happened. She could feel their stares like pinpricks on her skin. Finally, the secretary's phone buzzed. "He'll see you now." Ashford was standing by the window when she entered, hands clasped behind his back, watching students run drills in the training yard below. He didn't turn around. "Miss Williams, I thought our conversation yesterday was final." "Sir, I brought documentation this time at—" Zoe stepped forward and spread her materials across his desk. "The official incident report, photographs of my injuries, a time-stamped video. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for a fair evaluation of the facts." Ashford turned slowly. He picked up the incident report, glanced at it for maybe 5 seconds, and set it back down. "Very thorough." Hope flickered in Zoe's chest. "Then you'll let me retake the exam?" "No." The word hit her like a slap. "Sir, this proves I wasn't skipping class. 3 people are alive because of what I did. And that's admirable. But documentation explains why you were absent. It doesn't change what the system records. You didn't have it. Because I was pulling children out of a burning car. You stepped outside the rules. This institution doesn't bend, no matter how noble the reason." Zoe felt her hands shaking. She pressed them flat against the desk to steady herself. "Let me make sure I understand. You're telling me the right student is the one who keeps walking." Ashford's expression didn't change. "I'm telling you exactly what the handbook tells me to tell you." "That's not an answer. This conversation is over." He sat down behind his desk and picked up a pen. "You have until tomorrow to settle your account. Close the door on your way out." Zoe gathered her useless evidence. At the door, she stopped. "My father was Marcus Williams. He was a firefighter for 15 years. He died saving children from a burning building." Her voice cracked. "He taught me to never walk past someone who needs help. I thought this academy believed the same thing." Ashford didn't look up. "I'm sorry for your loss. The policy remains unchanged." Zoe walked out of his office, feeling like she was moving underwater. The hallway stretched ahead of her, too bright, too loud. She pushed through the side exit and kept walking, not caring where she was going, just needing to get away from this building, away from Ashford's cold eyes and empty words. She was halfway across the parking lot when she felt it, that prickling sensation on the back of her neck. Someone was watching her. She slowed her pace but didn't turn around. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught movement near the equipment bay, a figure standing in the shadow of the doorway, not quite hidden, but not fully visible either. Zoe stopped walking. Her heart was still pounding from the meeting with Ashford, and now this. She turned slowly. Instructor Ray Coleman stepped out of the shadows. He was the only black instructor at the academy, a quiet man in his 50s who had been her mentor since freshman year. He had always been kind to her, always encouraged her, but right now, his face carried an expression she had never seen before. Something heavy, something that looked like guilt. He glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then gestured for her to follow him. "Walk with me." He led her around the back of the building, past the training yard to a bench near the fence where the security cameras didn't reach. Zoe noticed that he checked over his shoulder twice before sitting down. "You went to see Ashford again. How did you know?" "I saw you waiting outside his office. I wanted to warn you, but—" He trailed off, rubbing his hands together. "I couldn't. Not there. Not where anyone could see." "Warn me about what?" Coleman was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You're not the first, Zoe. In the 10 years I've been keeping track, 23 students have been pushed out of this academy, just like you. Every single one had some policy violation on their record. Missed a deadline, showed attitude problems, failed to follow proper procedure." He paused. "Every single one was black or Latino." Zoe felt something cold settle in her stomach. 23. "That's just the ones I know about. Could be more." He reached into his bag and pulled out a worn manila folder, thick with papers. "I've been collecting evidence for years. Names, dates, circumstances, everything that didn't add up." She took the folder. It was heavier than she expected. "Why haven't you done anything with this?" Coleman's face twisted. For a moment, he looked like a man carrying a weight that was slowly crushing him. "Because I'm a coward. Because I have a mortgage and 2 kids who need help with tuition. Because I've seen what happens to people who speak up around here." His voice dropped even lower. "They don't fire you outright. That would be too obvious. They cut your hours. They give you the worst shifts. They find little ways to make your life miserable until you quit on your own. And then they act surprised when you leave. So you just watched all these years." I told myself I was building a case, waiting for the right moment, the right person. He finally met her eyes. "Your father was the bravest man I ever worked with. I see him in you. Maybe you can do what I was too scared to do." Zoe opened the folder and looked at the first page. A name she didn't recognize, a date from 8 years ago, a list of violations that sounded almost identical to what Ashford had just thrown at her. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because they're going to destroy you, Zoe, the same way they destroyed everyone else, and I can't just stand by and watch it happen again, not to Marcus Williams' daughter." That evening, Zoe sat alone in her apartment, the folder spread across her kitchen table. 23 names stared up at her. 23 people who had dreams just like hers. 23 people who had been ground down by a system designed to break them. The television was on in the corner, muted. Her rescue video was playing on the local news again. The hashtag HeroZo scrolled across the bottom of the screen. 5 million views. Her phone buzzed. An email notification. "We are pleased to announce that the EMT paramedic internship position at Atlanta Fire Department has been awarded to Kyle Ashford." Kyle Ashford, the director's son. Second place in every ranking. The student who had never once outperformed her in anything. Zoe set the phone down carefully. If she held it any longer, she might throw it against the wall. Her mother called just after 9. Zoe almost didn't answer, but she knew her mother would worry if she didn't pick up. "Baby, I saw the news." Her mother's voice was exhausted the way it always sounded after a double shift. What happened with the school? They won't let me retake the exam. They're taking my scholarship. Silence. Then, how much do we need? $42,000 by tomorrow. I'll talk to the bank. Maybe if I refinance the house, take out a second mortgage. No, Mama. The word came out sharper than Zoe intended. She took a breath and tried again. No, you already work 60 hours a week. You haven't had a real day off since Daddy died. I'm not going to let you destroy yourself for me. This is your dream, baby. This is what your father wanted. Daddy wanted me to help people. He wouldn't want you killing yourself to pay for it. Her mother was quiet for a long time. So what are you going to do? Zoe looked at the folder on the table, at the 23 names, at her father's photograph watching her from the wall. I don't know, Mama. I really don't know. After she hung up, Zoe turned off all the lights and sat in the darkness. The silence pressed against her ears. She thought about giving up, about walking away and finding another path, about accepting that sometimes doing the right thing meant losing everything. Maybe her father had been wrong. Maybe the world didn't reward people who ran into burning buildings. Maybe it just crushed them and moved on. She was about to go to bed when her phone rang. Unknown number. She stared at it for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the decline button. Probably a scam call. Probably nothing. She answered anyway. Miss Williams. Yes. Who is this? My name is Margaret. I'm calling from the office of Governor Eleanor Patterson. Zoe sat up straight. The governor. That had to be some kind of mistake. I'm sorry, did you say the governor? Yes, ma'am. Governor Patterson would like to meet with you tomorrow morning if you're available. I don't understand. Why would the governor want to meet with me? There was a pause on the other end. When Margaret spoke again, her voice was softer. Those two children you pulled from the burning car yesterday? Lily and Ethan. Another pause. They're the governor's grandchildren, Miss Williams. You saved her grandchildren's lives. Zoe couldn't breathe. The room seemed to tilt around her. Maybe things were about to change. Zoe barely slept that night. She kept replaying the phone call in her head, trying to convince herself it wasn't some kind of cruel joke. The governor's grandchildren. She had saved the governor's grandchildren. At 6:30 the next morning, she was already dressed and waiting by the window. She had changed clothes 3 times, unsure what you were supposed to wear when meeting the most powerful woman in the state. She finally settled on the nicest blouse she owned and a pair of dark pants that didn't have any stains or holes. At exactly 7 o'clock, she heard it. A sound that didn't belong in her neighborhood. A deep rhythmic thumping that grew louder and louder until the windows started to rattle. She looked outside and her jaw dropped. A helicopter was descending into the parking lot of her apartment complex. Not a news helicopter, not a medical helicopter. A sleek black machine with tinted windows that looked like it cost more than every car in the lot combined. Doors started opening all along the building. Her neighbors stepped out onto their balconies, pointing and shouting. Children ran toward the parking lot, their mothers chasing after them, yelling at them to stay back. The helicopter touched down, the rotors slowed, and a door opened. The woman who stepped out was smaller than Zoe expected, shorter, but she moved with the kind of confidence that made everyone around her seem smaller by comparison. She wore a simple gray suit, no jewelry except for a wedding ring, and her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Governor Eleanor Patterson walked straight across the parking lot, past the gawking neighbors, past the excited children, and stopped directly in front of Zoe's door. Zoe opened it before she could knock. Miss Williams. The governor's voice was warm but direct. Thank you for agreeing to see me. May I come in? Zoe stepped aside, suddenly aware of how small her apartment was, how worn the furniture looked, how the water stain on the ceiling seemed to grow larger every time she looked at it. I'm sorry about the mess, Governor. I wasn't expecting. Please. Patterson held up a hand. I didn't come here to judge your housekeeping. I came here to thank you. Behind her, a man in an expensive suit entered carrying a laptop bag. He was tall, with graying temples, and the sharp eyes of someone who spent his life looking for details other people missed. This is James Morton, Patterson said. My personal attorney. He specializes in civil rights cases. Morton shook Zoe's hand. It's an honor, Miss Williams. What you did was extraordinary. They sat down in Zoe's small living room, the governor taking the worn armchair like it was a throne. Morton set up his laptop on the coffee table. Zoe perched on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a long moment, Patterson just looked at her, studying her. Then she spoke. My daughter died last year. Cancer. She was 34 years old. Her voice remained steady, but Zoe could see the pain behind her eyes, the kind of pain that never fully heals. Lily and Ethan are all I have left of her. They're the only reason I get out of bed some mornings. Zoe didn't know what to say. I'm so sorry, Governor. When I got the call about the accident, my heart stopped. I thought God was taking them too. I thought I was going to lose everything. Patterson paused. And then they told me what happened. A young woman ran into the fire. A complete stranger. She didn't know who those children were. She didn't ask for anything. She just saw 2 kids who needed help. And she acted. Governor, I didn't save your grandchildren to get something in return. I would have done it for anyone. I know. Patterson leaned forward. That's exactly why I'm here. The people who deserve help the most are usually the ones who never ask for it. I appreciate the offer, ma'am. I really do. But I don't want charity. Patterson's eyes sharpened. Good, because I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a choice. She gestured to Morton, who turned the laptop toward Zoe. Tell me what you see. The screen showed a spreadsheet filled with names and dates. Zoe scanned it, her confusion growing. I don't understand. What is this? In the past 10 years, Morton said, 67% of students expelled from Georgia Fire Academy have been people of color, despite making up only 35% of total enrollment. Zoe felt the blood drain from her face. 67%. The pattern is unmistakable. Policy violations are enforced selectively. Students of color receive harsher punishments for identical infractions. Meanwhile, white students with connections receive second chances that never appear in any official record. Morton clicked to another screen. Kyle Ashford, the director's son. He failed 2 practical examinations last year. Both times he was quietly allowed to retake them. No documentation, no record, just arrangements made behind closed doors. Zoe thought about her own situation. 1 missed exam because she was saving lives, and they were ready to throw her out without a second thought. I have something too, she said quietly. She stood up and retrieved Coleman's folder from the kitchen table. One of the instructors gave me this. He's been collecting evidence for years. 23 students who were pushed out the same way they're trying to push me out. Morton took the folder and began flipping through it. His eyebrows rose higher with each page. Patterson watched Zoe carefully. So now you have a choice, Miss Williams. You can take your scholarship back, finish your degree, and pretend none of this ever happened. Or you can help me expose what's really going on at that academy. What do you mean expose? I mean a public hearing, testimony, evidence, everything laid out for the world to see. Patterson's voice hardened. I've been fighting battles like this my whole life. I know how these people operate. They stay in power because everyone is too afraid to speak up. They count on silence. They depend on it. Zoe looked at the folder in Morton's hands. 23 names. 23 people who had dreams just like hers. 23 people who had been crushed and forgotten. If I stay quiet, she said slowly, there will be a 24th, a 25th. It won't stop. No, it won't. Zoe took a deep breath. She thought about her father, about the choice he made 10 years ago, about running into burning buildings when everyone else was running out. I want to fight. Patterson smiled. It was the first real smile Zoe had seen from her. Good, because I didn't come here to beg Miss Williams. I came here to declare war. 3 days passed after the meeting with Governor Patterson. 3 days of phone calls with Morton, of reviewing documents, of trying to prepare for a fight. Zoe still wasn't sure she could win. On the morning of the 4th day, a letter arrived. She recognized the envelope immediately. The same heavy cream paper, the same embossed Academy logo that had haunted her nightmares since this whole thing started. Her hands were steady as she tore it open, but her heart was already racing. You are hereby summoned to an emergency academic review hearing regarding your continued enrollment. Please report to Conference Room B at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Attendance is mandatory. She read it 3 times. Then she called Morton. They're moving faster than we expected. He said, his voice tight. Someone must have tipped them off. They know we're building a case. What do I do? You go. You listen to everything they say. And Zoe, this is important. No matter what they threaten, no matter what they promise, you do not sign anything. Not a single piece of paper. Do you understand? I understand. They're going to try to scare you. They're going to make you feel like you have no options. But you do. Remember that. The next afternoon, Zoe walked through the front doors of Georgia Fire Academy for what might be the last time. The hallway leading to Conference Room B was empty, unnaturally quiet. Her footsteps echoed off the walls like a countdown. She had dressed carefully that morning, professional, but not flashy. She wanted to look like someone who took this seriously, not someone who was trying too hard. Her bandaged arms were hidden under long sleeves, but she could still feel the burns throbbing with every heartbeat. The door to Conference Room B was closed. She stood in front of it for a long moment, trying to slow her breathing, trying to remember everything Morton had told her. Then she pushed it open. The room was larger than she expected. A long table dominated one end, and behind it sat 5 people, all white, all wearing expressions of practiced neutrality that didn't quite hide the hostility underneath. Director Ashford sat in the center, his silver hair perfectly combed, his posture rigid. On his left were 2 administrators Zoe had seen around campus, but never spoken to. On his right, a woman with glasses who was flipping through a thick folder, and at the far end, a man she didn't recognize at all, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. There was one chair facing the panel, no table in front of it, no space for a lawyer or a witness. Just a single wooden chair positioned so that whoever sat in it would feel small and exposed. Zoe understood the setup immediately. This wasn't a hearing. This was an interrogation. "Miss Williams." Ashford's voice cut through the silence. "Please have a seat." She walked to the chair and sat down. Her back was straight, her hands folded in her lap. She would not let them see her shake. "This hearing has been convened to review your academic record and determine whether your continued enrollment is in the best interest of this institution." Ashford opened the folder in front of him with deliberate slowness. "It has come to our attention that you have a pattern of concerning behavior." "I'm sorry, a pattern. On March 15th of last year, you submitted a research paper 48 hours past the deadline." Zoe felt a flash of anger, but kept her voice steady. "My grandmother had a stroke. I was at the hospital with her for 3 days. I notified my instructor as soon as I could." Ashford continued as if she hadn't spoken. "On November 3rd, you were reported for disruptive behavior during a curriculum review meeting. I asked a question. I asked why there were no instructors of color represented on the training committee. I don't see how that's disruptive. The report describes your tone as confrontational and inappropriate." Ashford set the paper down and looked at her directly. "You challenged the judgment of senior faculty members in front of the entire class. I raised a legitimate concern. You created a hostile environment for your fellow students and instructors." The woman with glasses leaned forward. "Miss Williams, we're not here to relitigate every incident. We're here to identify patterns, and the pattern we see is one of consistent disregard for institutional norms and authority." Zoe couldn't believe what she was hearing. They were taking isolated incidents, stripping away all context, and weaving them into a narrative designed to make her look like a troublemaker. "With respect," she said, "missing one deadline because of a family emergency and asking one question about diversity don't constitute a pattern of anything. Combined with your recent failure to complete a mandatory examination," Ashford cut in, "the picture becomes clearer. You have demonstrated repeatedly that you prioritize your own judgment over the rules of this institution. I missed that exam because I was pulling children out of a burning car. Which brings us to the matter at hand." Ashford slid a document across the table. It stopped just at the edge, close enough for Zoe to read the header. "Voluntary Withdrawal Agreement. We are prepared to offer you an opportunity," Ashford said. "Sign this form and you can leave the program without a formal disciplinary record. Your transcript will show a voluntary withdrawal. You'll be free to apply to other programs, pursue other paths. No permanent damage to your record." Zoe stared at the paper. It was already filled out, her name typed neatly at the top, a blank line at the bottom waiting for her signature. "And if I don't sign?" The man at the end of the table spoke for the first time. His voice was flat, almost bored. "Then we proceed with formal expulsion proceedings. The disciplinary record will follow you to every institution you apply to. Every employer who runs a background check will see it. Your career in emergency services will be over before it begins." The room fell silent. 5 pairs of eyes fixed on her, waiting. Zoe looked at the document. She thought about everything she had worked for. Every early morning, every late night, every sacrifice her mother had made. She thought about her father's dream, the promise she had made at his grave, the future she had been building since she was 12 years old. And then she thought about the 23 names in Coleman's folder, the students who had sat in this exact chair facing this exact choice, the ones who had signed because they were scared, because they didn't know they had options, because the system had beaten them down until they couldn't fight anymore. She pushed the paper back across the table. "I'm not signing." Something shifted in Ashford's expression. A flicker of surprise, maybe, or anger. It disappeared almost immediately, but Zoe saw it. "That's your decision, Miss Williams." His voice was colder now. "This hearing is adjourned. You will receive our formal determination within 48 hours. Zoe stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but she forced herself to walk normally. She would not let them see weakness. She would not give them that satisfaction. She made it through the door, down the hallway, out the side exit, into the parking lot. The afternoon sun was blinding after the fluorescent lights of the conference room. She leaned against the brick wall of the building and closed her eyes, trying to catch her breath, trying to stop the trembling that had started in her hands and was spreading through her whole body. She had done it. She had said no. But what came next? Zoe. Her eyes snapped open. Instructor Coleman was standing about 10 feet away, half hidden in the shadow of the building's overhang. He looked like he had been waiting for her. His face was drawn, his eyes heavy with something she couldn't quite name. "I know what happened in there," he said, stepping closer. "I heard them planning it yesterday. The whole thing was decided before you walked through the door. You knew, and you didn't warn me." "I tried." He stopped in front of her, his voice dropping. "I called your phone this morning, 3 times. It went straight to voicemail." Zoe remembered. She had turned off her phone to avoid distractions while she prepared. She hadn't checked it since. "I'm sorry," Coleman said. "I should have tried harder. I should have come to your apartment. I should have done something more." "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is." His voice cracked. "It's been my fault for 15 years. Zoe had never seen him like this. The calm, steady mentor she had known since freshman year was gone. In his place stood a man who looked like he was being crushed by a weight he had carried too long. "I've watched them do this over and over," he said. "Student after student. Good people, smart people, people who deserved so much better than what they got. And every single time I told myself there was nothing I could do. I had a family to protect. I couldn't afford to lose my job." He laughed bitterly. "You know what the worst part is? I actually believed that. I convinced myself that staying quiet was the responsible choice. The adult choice. But the truth is, I was just scared. I've been scared for 15 years, Zoe, and I'm so goddamn tired of it. Mr. Coleman, your father was my friend." The words came out rough, almost broken. "Did you know that we came up through the department together? We were in the same training class. When he died, I stood at his funeral, and I promised myself I would look out for you. I would make sure you got a fair shot." He shook his head. "And instead, I just stood by. I watched them try to destroy you the same way they destroyed all the others. I had evidence. I had recordings. I had 15 years of proof that this whole system is rotten, and I did nothing with any of it." "You gave me the folder," Zoe said quietly. "That wasn't nothing. It was the bare minimum. It was the least I could do and still be able to look at myself in the mirror." Coleman met her eyes. "But it's not enough anymore. I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small USB drive, recordings of faculty meetings where Ashford talked about which students needed to be managed, emails showing how they target certain people for extra scrutiny, documentation of every time Kyle Ashford got a second chance that nobody else would have gotten. He pressed the drive into her hand. "If you're willing to fight, I'll stand with you, whatever it costs me." Zoe looked at the drive in her palm. Such a small thing. But it could bring down everything. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. "Miss Williams, my name is Tanya Brooks. I'm an investigative reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I've been looking into Georgia Fire Academy for 2 years. You're the missing piece I've been waiting for. Can we meet?" Zoe stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she looked up at Coleman. "A reporter," she said. "She wants to talk." Coleman's expression shifted. Something that might have been hope flickered in his eyes. "Then I think," he said slowly, "things are about to get very interesting." The meeting that evening felt surreal. Governor Patterson sat in the worn armchair like she owned the place. Morton had spread documents across the coffee table. Coleman stood by the window, his eyes constantly flickering toward the parking lot. And Tanya Brooks sat cross-legged on the floor with her laptop typing while firing off questions. "Let me make sure I have this straight," Tanya said. "Internal documents showing selective enforcement, testimony from a current instructor, evidence of preferential treatment for the director's son, and federal diversity funds that may have been misappropriated." "Correct." Morton said. Tanya whistled softly. I've been investigating this academy for 2 years. I knew something was rotten, but I never had enough proof. She looked up, eyes bright. This changes everything. The board hearing is Thursday, Morton said. 4 days. If we time it right, the article drops the same morning. Maximum pressure. Coleman shifted by the window. Ashford won't take this lying down. He has connections everywhere. Which is why we move fast, Patterson replied. We hit hard, we hit public, and we don't give him room to breathe. Zoe's phone rang. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Sorry, I need to take this. She stepped into the bedroom. Mama? Silence. Too long. Mama, what's wrong? Baby. Her mother's voice was trembling. Someone called the hospital today, asking questions about me, about my work history. They talked to my supervisor. Ice formed in Zoe's stomach. Who? They didn't say, but they made sure I knew. A shaky breath. They said if you don't drop this, they'll make sure neither of us works in this city again. They said they have friends everywhere. Mama, I'm so sorry. Maybe you should stop, baby. Maybe this isn't worth it. Her mother was crying now. I already lost your father. I can't lose you too. Zoe closed her eyes. I love you, Mama. I'll call you back. When she returned to the living room, everyone was watching her. They're threatening my mother, she said quietly. Someone called her workplace. Silence. Patterson stood. This is how they operate. When they can't win on merit, they attack the people you love. They're counting on you to break. Maybe I should. Zoe's voice came out small. I'm putting everyone at risk. My mother has worked at that hospital for 20 years. What if she loses everything because of me? And if you back down? Patterson's voice was gentle but firm. What happens to the next student they target? Zoe didn't have an answer. After everyone left, sleep wouldn't come. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling until 2 in the morning, her mother's words echoing in her head. Finally, she got dressed and walked out into the night. The cemetery gates were closed, but she knew where the gap in the fence was. She slipped through and followed the familiar path until she reached the oak tree in the corner. Her father's headstone glowed pale in the moonlight. Marcus Williams, beloved husband and father. He gave his life so others could live. Zoe sat down on the cold grass beside it. Hey, Daddy. The wind moved through the leaves above her. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. She hugged her knees to her chest. I did what you taught me. I helped someone who needed help, and now they're trying to destroy me for it. They're going after Mama. They're going after everyone. She wiped her eyes. I don't know if I can do this. Everyone says be brave, but I'm not brave. I'm terrified all the time. The oak tree creaked softly. Zoe tried to remember her father's face, not from photographs, but from memory. His smile, his laugh, the safety of his arms when she was small. You told me once that our job isn't to be liked. It's to help people, even when they don't thank us. Even when it's hard, her voice cracked. You didn't choose safe, Daddy. You chose right, and it cost you everything. She stayed until the sky started to lighten. When she finally stood, something had shifted inside her. Not less afraid, but more certain. When she got home, her phone was full of notifications, messages from numbers she didn't recognize. She opened the first one. My name is David, expelled in 2018. They said I missed an exam. Truth is, my mother had a stroke. I heard what you're doing. I want to help. Another. This is Maria, kicked out in 2020 for attitude problems. My attitude problem was asking why there were no black instructors. I'm with you. And another. Expelled in 2019. My conduct issue was reporting a white student who cheated. Nothing happened to him. I was gone 3 months later. I'll testify. Message after message. Former students, former instructors, names from Coleman's folder, and names she'd never heard, all saying the same thing. You're not alone. We're with you. By the time she finished reading, tears were streaming down her face. But for the first time in days, they weren't tears of despair. That evening, Governor Patterson stopped by one last time. How are you holding up? Better. Zoe gestured at the printed messages covering her table. I think I'm ready. Patterson sat down across from her. Tomorrow will be hard. They're going to attack your character. They'll twist every mistake you've ever made. They'll try to make you cry, make you angry, make you say something you'll regret. I know. Are you scared? Zoe nodded, terrified. Good. Fear means you understand what's at stake. Patterson leaned forward. But remember this. You ran into a burning car to save 2 children you'd never met. You didn't think about danger. You didn't calculate odds. You just saw someone who needed help, and you acted. She held Zoe's gaze. Tomorrow, you walk into a room full of people who want you to fail. But compared to what you've already survived, she smiled, that room is just smoke, and you've already proven you can walk through fire. Zoe had never seen so many people in one place. The Academy's main auditorium held 300 seats. Today, over 400 people had crammed inside, filling every chair, lining the walls, crowding the doorways. Students in uniform sat next to former graduates. Reporters clutched notebooks and recorders. Camera crews from 4 different stations had set up along the back wall. Outside, thousands more were watching the live stream. The hashtag #JusticeForZoe had been trending since dawn. Zoe stood in the doorway, her heart slamming against her ribs. Coleman appeared beside her. Ready? No. Good. Neither am I. They walked in together. The crowd parted, and Zoe felt hundreds of eyes tracking her every step. She kept her gaze forward, trying not to look at the faces, trying not to think about what would happen if this went wrong. At the front of the auditorium, 9 people sat behind a curved table on a raised platform. The Board of Trustees, 7 men, 2 women, all white. Most of them were friends of Ashford. Most of them had been handpicked by him over the years. And there he sat at the far right of the table, looking like a man who had already won. His silver hair was perfect. His suit was immaculate. He caught Zoe's eye and smiled just slightly. A predator watching its prey walk into a trap. The chairman called the hearing to order. Director Ashford, you may begin. Ashford rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. He walked to the podium with the confidence of a man who owned the room. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be direct. What we're witnessing today is not a pursuit of justice. It's a coordinated attack on this institution by outside political forces who have their own agenda. He gestured toward Governor Patterson. The governor of Georgia has inserted herself into an internal academic matter. Why? Because Miss Williams saved her grandchildren, a debt she now feels obligated to repay, regardless of the facts. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Zoe felt her stomach tighten. Miss Williams is being portrayed as a victim, but let's examine the record. Ashford opened a folder. March of last year. A research paper submitted 48 hours late. November. A formal complaint filed against her for creating a hostile environment during a faculty meeting. January. Another missed deadline. And finally, a complete failure to appear for a mandatory examination. He looked directly at Zoe. This is not a student who was unfairly targeted. This is a student with a documented pattern of failing to meet her obligations. The car accident was simply the final straw. That's not true, Zoe said, rising to her feet. My grandmother had a stroke. That's why the paper was late. And I didn't create a hostile environment. I asked a question about diversity that made people uncomfortable. Miss Williams. The chairman's voice was sharp. You will have your opportunity to speak. Sit down. Zoe sat, her face burning. Ashford smiled. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, this institution has rules. Those rules exist for everyone, regardless of race, background, or personal circumstances. Miss Williams violated those rules. The consequences were applied consistently and fairly. He paused, letting the words settle. Now, I understand there are accusations being made against me personally, accusations of discrimination, of favoritism, of financial impropriety. He shook his head slowly. These accusations are baseless. They are being manufactured by people with political motivations, and I will not dignify them with a detailed response. He turned to face the board directly. But I will say this. If this board allows itself to be bullied by politicians and journalists into overturning a legitimate academic decision, it will set a dangerous precedent. Every student who fails will claim special circumstances. Every rule will become negotiable, and the integrity of this institution will be destroyed. He returned to his seat. Several board members were nodding. The chairman looked at Zoe's table. Mr. Coleman, you may present. Coleman walked to the podium. His hands were shaking slightly as he opened his folder. I've worked at this academy for 15 years. In that time, I've watched 23 students of color get pushed out for minor violations that white students survived without consequence. Objection! Ashford's voice cut through the room. Mr. Coleman is presenting unverified allegations as fact. He has no authority to make these claims. This is a hearing, not a trial, the chairman said, but he looked uncertain. Mr. Coleman, please stick to documented facts. Coleman's confidence wavered. I have documents. I have records showing that Kyle Ashford failed 2 examinations and was allowed to retake them without any official documentation. Those records were obtained improperly. Ashford interrupted. Mr. Coleman accessed confidential student files without authorization. Any evidence he's presenting is tainted. The chairman frowned. Is this true, Mr. Coleman? Coleman hesitated. I was trying to document a pattern of abuse. I didn't have any other way to... So you admit to violating student privacy regulations. I was trying to protect students who were being discriminated against. By breaking the rules yourself. Ashford stood, his voice rising. This is exactly what I'm talking about. People who think the rules don't apply to them. People who believe their personal sense of justice supersedes institutional policy. He pointed at Coleman. This man violated federal privacy laws. This woman violated examination policies. And now they want us to reward them for it. The room erupted. People shouting, board members arguing, the chairman banging his gavel. Zoe felt the ground shifting beneath her. This was going wrong. Everything was going wrong. Tanya Brooks stood up. Mr. Chairman, I have evidence of financial fraud that needs to be entered into the record. This is not a criminal proceeding. Ashford shot back. Miss Brooks is a journalist with no standing in this hearing. Her so-called evidence is hearsay and speculation. It's documented federal fund misallocation, Tanya said, holding up her laptop. $2.3 million in diversity grants redirected to administrative expenses and equipment purchases from a company owned by Director Ashford's brother-in-law. Lies. Ashford's composure cracked for the first time. This is a politically motivated smear campaign. Every dollar has been properly accounted for. Then you won't mind if the FBI takes a look at the books. The room went silent. Ashford's face had gone pale. You're threatening me. I'm stating facts. The FBI has already been contacted. An investigation is pending. Tanya looked at the board. You can side with Director Ashford today, but when the federal charges come down, everyone in this room will be asked where they stood. The chairman held up his hands. We need to take a recess. 15 minutes. The board filed out. The crowd broke into 1,000 conversations. Zoe sat frozen in her chair, trying to process what had just happened. Morton leaned over. This could go either way. Ashford's fighting harder than I expected. What do we do? You speak. When they come back, you need to make them see you as a person, not a policy debate. 15 minutes later, the board returned. The chairman's face was unreadable. Miss Williams, you may address the board. Zoe walked to the podium on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She looked out at the crowd, her mother's face tight with worry. Coleman looking defeated, Governor Patterson still composed but clearly concerned, and Ashford watching her with cold satisfaction. She took a breath. Director Ashford is right about one thing. Rules matter. Institutions need structure. I understand that. She saw a surprise flicker across a few faces. This wasn't what they expected. But rules aren't supposed to be weapons. They're supposed to protect people, not destroy them. And when the same rules are applied differently, depending on the color of someone's skin, they stop being rules. They become tools of oppression. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing the burn scars on her arm. I got these pulling 2 children out of a burning car. A 5-year-old girl named Lily. A 3-year-old boy named Ethan. They were screaming for help and nobody was helping them. 30 people stood there recording on their phones while those kids burned. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know their grandmother was the governor. I just knew they were going to die if I didn't do something. She looked at Ashford. You want to talk about rules? My father followed the rules. He was a firefighter for 15 years. Perfect record. Never missed a shift. And when he ran into a burning building to save 3 children, nobody told him he was violating policy. They gave him a medal, posthumously. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. He taught me that saving lives is what matters, not paperwork, not procedures, not making sure you cover yourself legally, just helping people when they need help. She turned to face the board directly. You can expel me if you want. You can make an example out of me, but you can't make me believe that letting children burn to death would have been the right choice. And you can't make the thousands of people watching this believe it either. She sat down. The room was silent. Governor Patterson stood. I didn't come here as a politician. I came as a grandmother. Those 2 children are all I have left of my daughter who died of cancer last year. When I got the call about the accident, I thought I was going to lose them too. Her voice was steady, but Zoe could see the emotion underneath. This young woman ran into fire to save my grandchildren. She didn't know me. She didn't want anything. She just saw 2 kids who needed help. Patterson looked at each board member in turn. If this academy punishes people for saving lives, then this academy has lost its way, and I will spend every resource I have making sure the people of Georgia know it." The chairman called for a vote. "All those in favor of reinstating Miss Williams and restoring her scholarship, please raise your hand." Zoe couldn't breathe. She watched as hands went up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 votes. They needed 5. A long pause. Then a fifth hand rose slowly, reluctantly. 5 votes in favor. The chairman's voice was strained. "The motion passes. Miss Williams is reinstated effective immediately." The crowd erupted, but the chairman wasn't finished. Furthermore, in light of the serious allegations raised today, Director Kevin Ashford is suspended from his position pending a full investigation. Ashford shot to his feet. "This is outrageous. You can't." "The vote has been taken, Director. Security will escort you from the building." 2 officers moved toward Ashford. For a moment, Zoe thought he might resist, but then something in him seemed to collapse. His shoulders sagged. His face went blank. As they led him past Zoe's table, he stopped. "This isn't over," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "You have no idea what you've started." Zoe met his eyes. "Neither do you." The weeks after the hearing blurred together like scenes from someone else's life. Tanya's article dropped the morning after the vote. By noon, it had been picked up by every major news outlet in the country. By evening, the hashtag #JusticeForZo had been replaced by something bigger, expose the system. The FBI moved faster than anyone expected. 2 weeks after the hearing, a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the Academy parking lot at 7 in the morning. Agents in blue windbreakers spread across the campus carrying warrants, seizing computers, loading boxes of documents into unmarked vans. Zoe watched from across the street with Coleman beside her. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing to say. Ashford was arrested at his home that afternoon. The footage played on every channel, the silver-haired director being led out in handcuffs, his face blank with shock, his perfect suit rumpled from the struggle. The charges included fraud, embezzlement of federal funds, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. His lawyer said he would fight. Nobody believed him. Kyle Ashford's downfall came 3 days later. The internal investigation uncovered not just the 2 exams his father had helped him cheat on, but 3 others. Answer keys provided in advance. Practical evaluations scored by instructors who had been pressured to pass him. A trail of favors and threats stretching back years. His internship was revoked. His enrollment was terminated. His certification was suspended pending review. The last anyone heard, he had left Georgia entirely running from a name that had become synonymous with corruption. But the investigation didn't stop at the academy's walls. Federal officials began examining fire academies across the country, using the evidence from Zoe's case as a template. Within months, they had identified similar patterns at 12 other institutions in 8 different states. The same selective enforcement, the same discriminatory expulsion rates, the same funds meant for minority students quietly redirected elsewhere. 156 former students received letters inviting them to appeal their expulsions. People who had given up on their dreams years ago, who had convinced themselves that the system was too powerful to fight, who had walked away, believing they were failures. Now they had a second chance. Zoe read about them in the news. A man in Texas who had been expelled for missing an exam when his wife went into early labor. A woman in Florida who had been pushed out for complaining about harassment from an instructor. A young man in Ohio whose only crime was asking why the curriculum didn't include any black medical professionals in its history section. 23 names in Coleman's folder, 156 across the country. And those were just the ones who came forward. Coleman called Zoe one evening in early summer. His voice sounded different than she had ever heard it. Lighter somehow. Unburdened. "They offered me the job." Zoe sat down slowly. "What job?" "Acting director. They want me to run the academy while they search for a permanent replacement." He paused. "I told them I'd only accept on one condition. Full authority to reform the program, new hiring practices, new oversight, a complete review of every expulsion from the past decade." And they agreed. They didn't have a choice. The board is terrified of more bad press. They'll agree to anything that makes them look like they're taking action. "Mr. Coleman, that's incredible." "It's terrifying." He laughed softly. 15 years I spent keeping my head down, telling myself there was nothing I could do. Now I'm in charge of fixing everything I was too scared to fight. You'll be great at it. I don't know about that, but I know I can't do any worse than what came before. His voice grew serious. Zoe, I spent 15 years being a coward, watching good people get destroyed and telling myself it wasn't my problem. You showed me that was a lie. You showed everyone. 3 months after the hearing, Governor Patterson held a press conference at the state capitol. Zoe stood beside her on the steps, squinting in the afternoon sun, surrounded by reporters and cameras, and more microphones than she had ever seen in one place. Today, I am proud to introduce the Hero Protection Act, Patterson announced. This legislation ensures that no student or trainee in the state of Georgia will ever be punished for missing an academic obligation while performing a documented act of life-saving. She turned to Zoe. This young woman saved my grandchildren's lives, and she was nearly expelled for it. That should never happen again. Not here, not anywhere. The bill passed with an overwhelming majority. Within a year, 5 other states had adopted similar legislation. 3 more were considering it. Coleman invited Zoe to the academy 6 months after the hearing. She hadn't been back since the day of the vote. The building looked the same from the outside, but inside, everything had changed. New faces in the hallways, new photographs on the walls, a display case near the entrance honoring students who had performed acts of service in their communities. We've increased enrollment of students of color by 30%, Coleman told her as they walked, hired 4 new instructors from underrepresented backgrounds, implemented blind grading for all written examinations. That's amazing. It's a start. He stopped in front of a door she didn't recognize. There's something else I wanted to show you. He opened the door. Inside was a small conference room that had been converted into a memorial. Photographs lined the walls, names and dates. Faces of people Zoe didn't recognize. The 23 students, Coleman said quietly. The ones from my folder. We tracked down as many as we could, invited them back for a ceremony, apologized publicly for what happened to them. Zoe walked slowly around the room, looking at each face. Young people with bright eyes and hopeful smiles. People who had wanted to save lives just like her. Did any of them come back to the program? 7 of them. The others had moved on, built different lives. But they all said the same thing. Coleman's voice was thick. They said it meant something. Being acknowledged. Being told they weren't crazy, that what happened to them was real, and it was wrong. Zoe stopped in front of one photograph. A young woman about her age smiling in her academy uniform. Maria Santos, Coleman said, expelled in 2019 for attitude problems. She's enrolled again, starting next semester. She's the one who messaged me the night before the hearing. She's not the only one. Half of the people in this room reached out to you at some point. You gave them hope, Zoe. You showed them that fighting back was possible. Zoe didn't know what to say. She just stood there, surrounded by faces of people whose dreams had been stolen, people who were finally getting a second chance because she hadn't walked past. 1 year after the hearing, Zoe stood backstage at the academy's graduation ceremony, adjusting her cap in the mirror. The face looking back at her was different from the one she remembered. Not older exactly, but changed. The girl who had run into that burning car felt like someone from another life, someone she used to know. You ready, baby? She turned. Her mother stood in the doorway wearing a blue dress Zoe had never seen before. Her eyes were shining. I think so, Mama. Her mother crossed the room and took Zoe's hands. Your father would be so proud. I wish he could see this. He can. Zoe squeezed her hands. I know he can. The auditorium was packed, the same room where the hearing had taken place, but transformed. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Flowers lined the stage. Families filled every seat, dabbing their eyes, clutching programs with their graduates' names inside. Zoe sat in the front row with her classmates. 47 students who had made it through the program, the largest graduating class in the academy's history. Coleman stood at the podium, no longer the nervous man who had testified a year ago. He spoke with confidence now, with authority earned through action rather than title. 1 year ago, this institution was forced to confront some hard truths. We had failed our students. We had let prejudice and corruption take root in our halls. We had become the opposite of what we were supposed to be. He paused, but we also learned something important. Change is possible. One person with enough courage can force an entire system to reckon with its failures. He looked at Zoe. This year's valedictorian embodies everything this academy should stand for. Not just academic excellence, but moral courage. The willingness to do what's right when doing nothing would be so much easier. Zoe walked to the stage as the crowd rose to their feet. She saw her mother crying in the front row. She saw Coleman nodding with quiet pride. She saw Tanya Brooks in the press section still taking notes after all this time. And she saw sitting in the second row 2 small children bouncing with excitement, Lily and Ethan. Governor Patterson sat beside them, one hand on each small shoulder, smiling. Zoe stepped up to the podium and looked out at the crowd. 1 year ago, I made a choice. I saw 2 children in a burning car, and I stopped to help them. It wasn't a hard decision. It wasn't even a decision, really. It was just what my father taught me to do. She paused. What came after was harder. Fighting a system that wanted me gone. Speaking up when everyone said to stay quiet. Believing that the truth mattered when the people in power were working so hard to bury it. She looked at her mother. I couldn't have done it alone. My mother who gave everything so I could stand here today. Mr. Coleman who found his courage when it mattered most. Governor Patterson who turned a personal debt into a fight for justice. And all of you, the students and families and strangers who stood with me when standing was dangerous. She straightened her shoulders. My father died saving lives. For a long time I thought following in his footsteps meant being willing to die too. But this year taught me something different. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't dying for what you believe, it's living for it. Showing up every day and fighting even when you're exhausted, even when you're terrified, even when the odds feel impossible. She held up her diploma. This paper doesn't mean I've arrived, it means I'm just getting started. The crowd erupted in applause. As Zoe stepped down from the stage, Lily and Ethan broke free from their grandmother and ran toward her. She knelt and caught them both in her arms. Thank you for saving us, Lily said seriously. Grandma says you're a hero. Zoe smiled. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who didn't walk past. After the ceremony, Governor Patterson found her. I have something for you. She handed Zoe an envelope. The Williams Foundation awarded its first scholarships this month. 47 students. Full funding. Zoe opened the envelope. 47 names. 47 people who would get the chance she almost lost. We named it after your father, Patterson said. But it exists because of you. 6 months later, Zoe reported for her first shift at Atlanta Fire Department. The station looked exactly as she remembered from childhood. The same building where her father had worked for 15 years. The same trucks she used to climb on when he carried her through on his shoulders. The chief met her at the door, a tall woman with kind eyes. Miss Williams, we've been waiting for you. She led Zoe through the station to a row of lockers along the back wall. One of them still had a nameplate that read M. Williams. Your father's locker, the chief said quietly. We never reassigned it. Didn't feel right. She paused. We were waiting for the right person. Zoe opened the locker. Inside on a hook hung a photograph. Her father, young and grinning, standing in front of this same station on his first day. Welcome to the team, the chief said. Before Zoe could respond, the alarm rang. She grabbed her gear and ran for the truck, climbing in beside her new crew. As the engine roared to life, sirens wailed. The bay doors opened. As they pulled out onto the street, Zoe looked up through the window at the clear blue sky. I made it, Daddy, she whispered. I'm here. The truck raced through the city toward a column of smoke rising in the distance, toward someone who needed help, toward the job her father had loved, the job that had cost him his life, the job she had spent her whole life preparing for. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was ready, and she would never walk past.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.